Good morning. My name's Charlotte Davis, and I'm a holistic therapy consultant and an education consultant in South London. I work with a lot of youngsters and adults with some kind of blockage to their sound processing system. And what I'd like to do today is take you through a pretty typical case, and that is looking at the film H is for Harry, which is a very good film. And if you haven't watched it, I'd stop now and go away and watch it. So H is for Harry, nice film. And what I want to do is take you through why the boy has problems and why, to be honest, it could all have been sorted out and not have ended in a sad ending. So it's a social documentary. It's highlighting how difficult it is for youngsters to get academic qualifications, particularly from the poorer socioeconomic backgrounds, and how there is very poor social mobility in Britain today. That if you're born poor and struggling to learn, you're going to stay poor with low skills. And that goes generation unto generation unto generation. That is why we've got such poor social mobility. It's a really big indicator of it. This film follows 18 months in the life of Harry, who is then aged 11 going through to 12, and the support of his really super dad, who is a really nice guy, and very caring young teachers at his school, the Reach Academy, Feltham. You can buy or borrow the film from Mercurial Films at the following Vimeo link, and it's a very reasonable price, and it's well worth buying because you can go backwards and forwards and you can really think about it. So if you haven't, stop now, go away, watch the film, really think about it, then start again thinking about my analysis. You can argue, you can dispute whether you think it's right or not, but we need to think about children's development big time. So the most important thing you have to appreciate is that humans are distinctly different from other primates. We have this incredibly long childhood. We're going from helpless infant to skilled runner. Not many other primates run the kind of distances we run. And we're up on two legs. So think about it. We've got this very long period of infancy from 0 to 7, 8 years of age. We go on developing right through to 25. Our brain is developing, our shoulders are getting wider. We are physically developing right through to 25. And as we develop, our global skills, our cognition should be developing. In evolutionary terms, we are pro-social, so we're very sociable. We're hunter-gatherers. We are long-distance runners. We're tremendously long-distance runners. We go on two legs. We're bipeds. And we sweat a lot in order to stay cool, to run. We are amazingly good at sound processing and speaking languages, producing music, holding a rhythm. We have incredible sound processing compared to other animals. Our larynx, though, to do that is lower, and that means there's always a risk of choking for humans, but it's a trade-off. We have binocular vision. Ideally, both eyes work together all the time to send equal messages from eye to brain. So we can see 3D, we can see colour. We just have tremendous things that our brain can do with vision when both eyes work well together. The really exciting thing about humans is we are what's called neuroplastic. We can change depending on the environment. So I play around with sound therapy, and even at 60 plus, I can change my sound processing. I can change my posture. I can change my motor skills. I can learn new languages. I can go on developing my brain really until I die. That is incredible. No other animal can do that. And we can. And what's more exciting is it's our environment that determines how we develop ourselves. So the more interesting and varied things we do, the more we develop. There are odd trade-offs. The more language you have, the more reading you do, the more difficulty you have identifying faces. So there are odd brain trade-offs. But basically, we're amazing. But we have to get everybody to that state. So we want to have a look at Harry. Things aren't that great for Harry. And we want to look in detail. What is it that we should have spotted to make sure Harry's environment was right, that it did support him, and that he would have ended up as a really efficient learner. So, first thing to do is look at motor skills. Remember, in Britain we have no serious PE curriculum. Unlike other primates, the muscles in our upper back allow us to separate our head movement from our body movement. And so we ought to be able to move our head separate to our body. That links to what's called primitive reflex that we had at birth, and through learning to crawl, we ought to separate our head from our body movements. Not everybody does that, and I am certain that Harry didn't. And because Harry hasn't done that, he's going to have problems with his eyes jumping at the midline. So every time he reads a piece of text, he gets to the middle, his eyes will jump. And there will also be what's called overflow, because he's struggling to get left and right working. What's going to happen is for him around his jaw, you're going to see him making odd jaw movements. You can also see it with people when they're sticking their tongues out, or when there's a lot of blinking going on. That's also a sign there's a problem going from left to right. And it's important that teachers, parents, health professionals are looking out for those signs. Harry does it habitually. Honestly, from day one in the academy through to the day he leaves, we are getting gestures around the mouth. And we have to recognise that is telling us very loudly, left and right don't work together. And he has to keep clamping his jaw to get left and right working together. That affects every single aspect of his work. So tying up his shoelaces. He can't tie up his shoelaces because left and right sides don't work together. He can't see how those two laces can possibly come together. That affects his understanding of every other concept. Just think how that affects maths. When I'm assessing people, I get them to do a 12-piece jigsaw puzzle. I want to see if they go to one side. I want to see if they go to the other side. I want to see if they make half the puzzle with one hand and the other half with the other hand. And it is not unusual for me to see that left and right gets made separately, and then the person struggles to bring the two halves of the jigsaw puzzle together. 12-piece jigsaw puzzles are not difficult. If you can't do that, you can't access any serious maths. You don't understand how things work as a whole. It is a really big problem. So you're going to be spending every day at school switching from one side to the other, trying to get your understanding of things, trying to use coping strategies. Would be a lot more sense just to sort out the basic development, which is relatively easy. The second area I'm worried about him is his core strength, his trunk. To support humans when they're running, we have got the most incredibly strong muscles. All the way down our back, we have very tight core muscles inside our gut. And we can really control our bodies well if we're well developed. We stay upright. I don't think Harry has got that development because we get this curled back all the time. And that links to a primitive reflex called the Tonic Labyrinth reflex. And that's, again, comes through crawling and developing strength when you're an infant. And if that is not in place, what happens is it impacts on his postural control, so he can't get his posture upright properly, but it also impacts on his sound processing, so he can't make sense of sound because his body's curled in. The whole body needs to work to process sound. It impacts on his eye movements, again, and this time being able to focus near, focus far, bringing his eyes up and down. So there are already motor skills reasons why his eyes are not going to work well. There are motor skills reasons why his sound isn't going to work well, and his motor skills themselves don't work well in the concept of left and right. He's going to be sitting in a classroom working about 5% of his sensory system. It's going to be exhausting. So we can see with him, his posture is that horrible sideways on V. And so he's already developing a bit of a hump on his spine with that rounded back. So his head and jaw are down, it's blocking his airways, he's probably breathing quite shallowly. We need to prioritise this sort of basic development in a physical education curriculum. Every country needs to do it, Britain more than most. I'm worried about anxiety. There is a reflex called the Morrow Reflex. It is based in your original startle reflex when the baby does that startle movement, and they're in a hyper alert state. They cry, mum comes, comforts them, all is well. They should, as they develop crawling, integrate that reflex, and they should come out of being in a hyper alert state. If they haven't integrated it, that can keep them hyper alert. But we don't know with Harry, because Harry is medicated for anger management. So I don't think we're seeing the real Harry here. My suspicion is he's probably got a retained Morrow reflex, which makes the left and right business worse. And that is also suppressing his brain. It is chemically koshing him. No one has actually tried to sort out any of his underlying issues. There are very serious questions asked about children being medicated at all for behavioural issues and what it's doing to them developmentally. And personally, I would not. We have to deal with the fundamental development of the children, and Harry is sitting there effectively being blocked in developing properly. But it's not bothering anyone because they've medicated him now. The next thing we need to do is have a think about sound processing. And so think about humans. Our larynx is low, we can produce speech. Harry speaks, so I'm pretty happy, that we're speaking. But the larynx, if you've got a Morrow reflex or you've got rooting reflexes, you may find it's too high. And lowering the Morrow reflex makes the sound processing work better. The posture, as I said, is important. And Harry never sits up, so he's not using his whole body to sound process. Breathing is important, particularly having really good airways working. Harry looks like he's breathing through his nose, his breathing is good, and he looks okay. Inner ear infection is a big issue. If you haven't got good posture and you've got rounded posture, your inner ear has more difficulty draining. You are more likely to get inner ear infection, and you're more likely when you're young too. So I suspect that's where the problems have been, because both Harry and his father have quite rounded posture, and they both have issues. If you've had trauma, you can have problems where you close your sound down. That might have happened. He's had a very disrupted childhood. He's been in a pupil referral unit. He's felt rejected for years. So he can have already suppressed his sound processing. Complex births can do the same. The good news is sound processing is incredibly plastic. You can raise it, you can get it working again, you can shift people from not being able to differentiate between tones to being able to differentiate. You can make people really good at singing, really good at music. You can really build up sound processing skills. So the reasons I think Harry has a sound processing problem: his speech is not clear, nor is his dad's. So there's some family issue, but as I said, they've both got very rounded posture. That's going to predispose them to inner ear infection. When he's in class, he zones out very quickly. He can't concentrate on spoken teaching. He's very quick. You can see him just... So it's exhausting him listening in class. He gets agitated when he's put on the spot to say a complex word like photosynthesis. So a lot of syllables in that word. He's having difficulty remembering them auditorily. Even basic spellings, he has enormous difficulty. He needs a lot of one-on-one with very quiet background to get him to a stage where he can do simple spellings. And as I said, posture poor, and also the jaw business. It's all around here in your inner ear. Your jaw is clamping up on the nerves, and that can also interfere with sound processing. So all his development needs to be supported. His sound processing needs to be agitated. We need to get it all working, but nobody is. And when you look at sound processing, you realize it affects global skills. So things like your motor skills are affected by sound processing, your balance, your orientation, your acceleration, deceleration. So all of those skills are really important underlying skills for maths. Sound links with your optical nerve. So sound and vision are linked. Sound is linked to your facial muscles, which affects your social skills. So you can get quite agitated because you're picking up the wrong social message. And sound obviously is there in the package. And getting the muscles in the inner ear working, agitating the vestibular system in the inner ear, and getting global development going is really important. And nobody has offered Harry any sound therapy to get that working. That is a big problem, because if you've got disruption to your sound, it is going to disrupt your eye movements when you read for meaning. So in the case of this youngster, an older student, but caught up in the whole young offender system, eyes could move perfectly well when reading numbers, but when it combines sound and vision, the eyes start dysregulating. They can't do it because of the sound disruption. I'm sure that's happening to Harry, and neither he nor his teacher have any idea. So it's like you know how to do something and then it just disappears. And you've no understanding that your sensory system is flickering and doing strange things in terms of sending messages from eye to brain. That really makes you feel a bit mad. It's very disheartening, and it's not a pleasant experience. Other thing you have to be aware of is humans need two eyes working together, sending equal messages to the brain, because it is the brain that's going to do the seeing. And I know already Harry hasn't got binocular vision. He can't possibly have because his motor skills are in a bad place. He can't possibly have because his sound processing isn't working well. And then when we watch him reading, he's going from one side to the other side. He's shuffling his head. What he's doing is switching from left to right eye. He's desperately trying to get messages from eye to brain. He's trying his very hardest. My suspicion is what's actually happening is he can't focus. Left and right eye are flickering. So that double vision, the flickering, is interfering. We need to get the eye muscles strengthened. We need to get the posture sorted. He's got a lot of work to do before we can get the vision working properly. In the meantime, he is exhausted and he's really trying his best to learn, but there's not a chance. By year 8, we're getting a lot more lean, a lot more of this. And my suspicion is that he's unconsciously learning to turn off one eye. So he's predominantly, as you can see, he's working with his right hand and left eye. And that head is always tilted over. And there is all the time trying to make sense of the world. When he writes, we've got some pretty big font text. That's suggesting to me that he can't focus finely, that he needs things in big font. And of course, as he goes through secondary school, the font gets smaller and smaller. It's too small for everyone, but it's exceptionally small for him. And that's really terrifying because he's being told, oh, if you've got a growth mindset, all will be well. But he can't. He cannot possibly get a growth mindset because he's being asked to do highly complex tasks that are well beyond what he can do with a skill set which is not properly developed, and nobody has supported development. And that mismatch is going to cause him, as you see in the film, to become very depressed, disheartened. He becomes quite, his behaviour just starts exploding all the time because he knows he can't do it. And he's constantly told, oh, but if you had the right mindset, you wouldn't have a problem, which is exhausting. So it's really important that we think about the messages we're giving people. And if someone's got delays in their development, they need to be given the skills to move up and develop those skills until they have a full set of skills, what's called motor sensory integration, where all the senses and the motor skills work together so they can learn efficiently. That is the teaching that is appropriate to their needs. Giving them year 8 chemistry is just terrifying. Giving them coping strategies, so you get them very quietly on their own, you do all sorts of things in order to shuffle them into the next year. In many ways, that is also quite cruel, because all you're doing is pushing it up the line, and sooner or later it will be impossible to continue, as we see in year 8 with Harry. It becomes impossible to continue and he falls off the cliff. He, to be honest, instigates it. He pushes the behaviour because he knows he doesn't want to be there, he knows he can't do it. He's actually probably the most skilled person in this game, who's got a more realistic view of things, but can't explain it in words. So, all a bit sad, really. What I think is actually happening to Harry's vision is, I don't think, certainly by year 8, both eyes are working together. I think both dysregulate for anything he does. And so he's probably actually losing skills from year 7 to year 8 because his postures become much more over at an angle. And his eyes will utterly dysregulate when it comes to read for meaning. And the task just gets more and more exhausting, and he's getting more and more anxious. So it's all pretty tragic. There is no way he is going to do anything other than fail, because he's not been given the basic skills to succeed. So things need to change. Teacher training needs to be informed properly about child development and exactly how to support people through to maximise their development. It also needs to be aware, and teachers need to be properly informed, how trauma can impact on child development and put children back, and how one can supportively take them through to proper development. And for some children, that is going to take a lot of skilled work and support, but it's possible for everybody by the time they emerge, the end of our long childhood, to be properly developed. Education needs to have a clear objective to support child development and to check it. Children's mental health and general health care professionals need to have a better understanding of holistic child development. It just simply doesn't exist. We have very poor understanding of how children develop motor sensory integration. Children should be assessed using diagnosis by elimination. Checking every single stage is in place. It should not be possible to prescribe medication without addressing all the other issues first. I am sure we would not have ADHD, etc., if we did that. Formal education shouldn't start until a child's ready. So when Harry gets to year 7, the priority should be to get him to good development. Then he can sail through secondary education. For our children coming in at reception at 4 years old, we ought to be dedicating the years from 4 through to 7, really making sure they've got fabulous motor sensory integration. They are fabulously well developed and well skilled humans who have tremendous speech and sound processing, who've got the muscle and motor skills development. That means they will become really efficient runners. We want people to have all their senses working properly before we ask them to do complex tasks that involve all the senses and motor skills working together. So reading and writing and any really serious skills in maths require all of those skills in place. So let's make our children fit to learn. If you want to get hold of me, these are my contact details. And if you want sound processing equipment, Tomatis sound therapy equipment, I think, is the best in the world. I don't think anything matches it. And if you want to be able to really monitor where a child's developing, you need to be able to screen them properly with their equipment. So thank you for listening to me. If you've got any questions, feel free to contact me. If you want to set up training and for me to talk to professionals about what I'm seeing in this film and what to do, likewise, I am quite relaxed and chilled about everything. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.